Welcome to The Flow, hosted by Bob Martin, slightly edgy glimpses into politics, culture, society, and being human.
Hello, good people. Have you ever noticed that there's some folks that will take a pound of suffering to get a teaspoon of certainty? And actually, that expression comes from one that's just a little bit more crude, that goes something like taking a pound of shit to get a teaspoon of sugar. And excuse me for my French. But I want to be straight with you. Uh, I want to be straight with you about why I'm making this video. Like a lot of you, I spent the last several years watching people defend Donald Trump with a ferocity I can't explain, not through ordinary logic, not just politically, it seems. It's personal and fierce, as though the facts don't matter, because for them, somehow they don't. I've watched him get caught doing things that would have ended any other career in American history. I've watched him tell us exactly what he plans to do. I've watched him trade stocks in ways that would put anyone else in a federal courtroom. And I've watched his followers absorb all of it and come back stronger, more fierce. And I stood there, maybe like you, thinking, I don't understand this. I can't wrap my head around it. But here's the thing. I spent decades sitting across from human beings in courtrooms and therapy rooms trying to understand why people do what they do. And I've learned one thing above almost everything else, and that is that when behavior looks irrational from the outside, it almost never is on the inside. There's always a logic. There's always a reason. You just have to look. So I went looking. And what I found didn't make me any angrier. It made me sadder. And honestly, a little more compassionate towards people that I've genuinely struggled to feel compassion for. Let me share it with you. It starts with something called adverse childhood experiences. Researchers call them ACEs. These are the things that happen to us before we turn 18 that leave a mark. Physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, a parent lost to addiction or prison, a home held together by fear instead of love, a caregiver who was physically present but emotionally nowhere. Now, the CDC has been tracking these experiences across the country for years. And what they found is not a small problem, hiding in the margins. Nearly 2 out of every 3 American adults report at least one of these experiences. 1 in about 6 report 4 or more. Look around any room you walk into, a church, a grocery store, your office. 2 out of 3 people in that room are carrying something from before they were old enough to choose differently. Now, here's the part that matters. When a child grows up where love is unpredictable, where safety depends on pleasing the most powerful person in the room, where questioning authority brings punishment and loyalty brings relief, that child's brain learns a very specific lesson. Find the strongest person, attach to them, do not question them. Your safety depends on it. Now, that doesn't get learned as a thought. It gets learned as a reflex, wired in deep, below the level of reasoning, in the part of us that reacts before we even know we're reacting. If you listen and keep listening, you might see it. I have. Sometimes it starts with a question. Why do I keep doing this when I don't even like it? It's a relatively safe question, but keep listening. And then maybe up comes, it seems like something I get in my own way. And then I sabotage myself. Keep listening, keep listening, keep listening. Then it comes with tears and sobs and breathlessness. It is the sound of a heart breaking. I just don't feel I have a right to be happy. The question begged is, what happened to this human being that they were left with such a painful narrative? And here's the hard truth. Those reflexes don't disappear when we turn 18. They follow us into adulthood, wearing different clothes. They show up in who we choose to be with, in how we respond to being challenged, in whether we can sit with uncertainty or whether we desperately need someone to tell us who the enemy is. And they absolutely show up in politics. Because when a loud, certain, dominating voice steps forward and says, I alone can fix this, I will protect you, everyone else is the enemy, something in the nervous system of a person shaped by that kind of childhood doesn't process it as a campaign speech. It becomes something to drive across 5 states for, to sleep in the car for, to buy tickets they can't afford just to hear it again and again, just to be close to it. It processes it as a relief, not because they're stupid, but because they can't see the contradictions. But beneath the adult nodding along at the rally is still a child who learned that the strongest voice in the room is the only safe place to stand. And that child learned something else too. That if the powerful person in the room occasionally made you feel safe, occasionally made you feel seen, occasionally threw you something that felt like love, you endured whatever came with it. You took a pound of suffering for a teaspoon of certainty, because the certainty, however small, was the only kind you knew how to recognize. That dynamic doesn't retire at 18 either, and that's what I found when I went looking. That's what made me sad. Now, multiply that by millions, because that's what we're actually dealing with. Not one person, a country. A country where 2 out of 3 adults are carrying at least one significant childhood wound, where 1 in 6 carry 4 or more, where that much unresolved pain has been walking around for decades with nowhere healthy to go. What does a country look like when that happens? Well, look around. A research organization called More in Common studied American polarization deeply, surveyed thousands of people, mapped the landscape, and what they found should stop all of us cold. The 2 rigid wings, the true believers on the left and the devoted loyalists on the far right, the people on both sides for whom compromise is surrender and doubt is betrayal, represent about 17% of the country combined. 17%. And here's something I ask you to sit with for just a moment. 1 in nearly 6 Americans, about 16%, carry 4 or more ACEs, the level most likely to shape adult behavior in the ways we've been talking about. And the 2 rigid wings together are about 16% of the country. I noticed that. I thought you should too. The other 84%, the exhausted majority, are tired of the fighting. They hold complicated views. They don't fit neatly into either camp. They are, most of them, far more reasonable than the national conversation suggests. But that 16% is loud, certain, immovable. And they've taken over the conversation, leaving the rest of us feeling like the whole country has lost its mind. The rigidity is the clue. Rigid thinking, my side right, your side evil, my way or the highway. Now, that's not a political style. It's a trauma response. That's what happens in a nervous system that learned early on that uncertainty is dangerous, that questioning authority costs you, and the only safety is total loyalty to the tribe. So I want to be clear, this is not a left problem or a right problem. The mechanism is identical on both sides. The wound just wears different colors. Now here's where it gets really uncomfortable. There is a difference between a country that looks at its wounds and a country that looks away. And we have, for a very long time, been a country that looks away. I spent time in Germany. I've walked streets where the history is literally in the ground beneath your feet. Small brass plaques outside homes where Jewish families were taken from ordinary rooms and sent to their deaths. These plaques are not accidents. Germany made a deliberate national choice to keep the wound visible, not to punish itself endlessly, but because it understood something essential. You cannot heal what you will not name. And then I come home to a country closing exhibits at the Smithsonian, fighting in school boards and state houses to remove slavery from what our children learn, treating its own history like something too dangerous to touch. Now, that's not strength. That is a traumatized nation doing exactly what traumatized people do, hiding the thing that hurts and pouring that pain into politics, into fury, into the certainty that the other side is not just wrong, but evil. Following anyone who promises to make it stop becomes the opioid, the thing that allows survival. The 16% are the loudest expression of it, but the wound belongs to all of us. So where does that leave us? Not with easy answers. There is no policy that fixes this, no election that resolves it, no leader, however capable, who heals a wound this old in 4 years. But there is a way through, and it starts with something deceptively simple: seeing it. Not pointing at a Trump rally and feeling superior, not writing people off as stupid or deplorable or lost, but actually looking at what is underneath the behavior, at the wound that is driving the car where the ideology sits in the passenger seat pretending to be in charge. Because people do not change what they cannot see in themselves. And they almost never get there through shame. They get there through recognition. They get there through someone holding up a mirror gently enough so that they can stand to look into it. And that's what I'm hoping this does for someone watching right now. Maybe someone who finds themselves defending the indefensible and has never stopped to ask why the need to defend it is so fierce. Maybe just one person who sits quietly after this and thinks, is that what this is? That would be enough. And for those of you who love someone caught in this, who have argued and pleaded and forward articles and cannot understand why none of it lands, I want to offer you something. Contempt doesn't reach people. It never has. Not in a courtroom, not in a therapy room, not across a Thanksgiving table. The people you are trying to reach are not in a political disagreement with you. They are in a survival response. And survival responses don't respond to facts. They respond slowly and imperfectly, and only sometimes, to the experience of feeling genuinely safe. That doesn't mean you stop fighting for what matters. It doesn't mean the consequences aren't real. It just means the path back to each other, if there is one, runs through understanding before it runs through argument. A nation, like a person, cannot heal what it will not name, cannot move forward while it is hiding the thing that hurts it, cannot grow past a wound it insists was never there. We have some naming to do, individually and as a country. That's not weakness. That's the only way anything or anyone ever actually gets better. I'm Bob Martin. This is the flow. In order to go with the flow, you must first understand the flow.